The Cleveland Guardians just made a big splash at the deadline, trading away a starting pitcher with 2.5 years of control in Aaron Civale to the Tampa Bay Rays in exchange for a top 40 prospect in all of Major League Baseball in Kyle Manzardo. As the Guardians, only half a game out of the top seed in the AL Central at the time of this recording, go ahead and get a young first baseman who can help them out in the long term. Aaron Civale is going to provide immediate depth to a very deep Tampa Bay Rays team. They really do not need a ton of starting pitching, but you can never have too many as you head into the playoffs, especially as they go and try and contend for the AL East crown. Aaron Civale definitely fits the bill. He has an amazing sinker ball. Right now, if you look at Baseball Savant, which is the MLB's StatCast and statistical holding area, his sinker is currently the best in terms of run value out of all sinkers in the major leagues. And you can see there's three guys at the top and then a pretty considerable drop off. So his sinker is one of the best in the game of baseball. And if anyone can maximize that, it's going to be the Tampa Bay Rays. He's been very solid for the Cleveland Guardians this year, going 5-2 with a 2.34 ERA and a 1.04 WHIP. And his underlying metrics like FIP, SIERA, and xERA all seem to suggest he's performing just as well as his ERA and record indicate. As I mentioned, the 28-year-old has 2 years of control after this year, so he'll be a free agent after the 2025 season. But he'll be a huge part of a Tampa Bay rotation for this year and the next 2 years, following up with Shane McClanahan, Tyler Glasnow, Zach Eflin, Taj Bradley, and assisting the whole horde of prospects that Tampa Bay has right on the cusp of the major leagues and the rest of their very young and very, very talented team. Whenever you have two big powerhouses in the analytical world, like the Guardians and the Rays trading with each other, oftentimes you can get a good look at what these prospects mean to both these teams. They both have a lot of value and both fit what both these teams, who are known to be at the forefront of the analytical movement in baseball, really value in their prospects. They ended up getting back Kyle Manzardo, a 23-year-old first baseman in AAA, who's currently a top 40 prospect according to MLB Pipeline. He was a 2021 second-round pick out of Washington State University, the first position player that was an All-American there since John Orlude over 30 years ago. So he really did step up in a very big way in college. What's even crazier is during that All-American year, he had more extra base hits than strikeouts at 31-29, which is unheard of. You don't see that very often. So he really was a very, very, very good hitter for those Washington State Cougars, and that showed off in his draft capital and why an analytical team like the Rays were very happy to get him. His 2022 campaign in the minor leagues was electric. He made it all the way up to AA, and he was second in the minors with a 1.043 OPS and a 148 WRC+. So he absolutely tore his way up through the single A ranks and the AA ranks. He started this year in 2023 off in AAA, and he hasn't had that same success as he had in the past. Right now, he's slashing 238, 342, 442. And his K rate has jumped from 15 to 20%. So it's doing a little bit of an issue there, but his walk rates has gone up. He's now walking at about 13% of the time, which is definitely a solid number, but it's hard for any player to match the numbers that Manzardo put up in 2022. With that being said, his numbers aren't bad, and I think that's something important to distinguish. Although they haven't matched his 2022 campaign, by no means is he having a bad year. It just hasn't matched his insane potential that he flashed last year. I'm also going to show a tweet from Chris Clegg, who has a lot of experience in prospect reviews and has connections, to note that Manzardo has had some things go on behind the scenes. I'm not going to be one to speculate. I don't know anything about this situation, but he does seem to suggest that there is something going on in Manzardo's life that has affected his play on the field. So again, please don't speculate on it, but it looks like there might be something going on that the general public isn't and shouldn't be aware about his life. So let's talk a little bit more about his build. When you think first baseman, you think of power hitters, Frank Thomas, Jim Thome, Jason Giambi, but Manzardo doesn't fit that build. He is an elite contact guy. He's a hit over power kind of player, and although he's not going to hit for 400 like Luis Arraez is trying to do this season, he's going to have a very, very high average, think 330, 340 if he can reach his potential, and although he is quite a bit slower than your average player, he could very easily slide into a two-hole in a lineup and really be a nice table setter, get people on base. I think of Kyle Schwarber leading off for the Phillies, and although I think he's a little bit faster than Schwarber is, I think of that kind of mold of what they're going for, but Schwarber is a power hitter again, and not really a batting average guy, but that kind of build and that kind of speed at the leadoff spot, or the two-hole, is really what I'm thinking when I make that comparison. Scouts really drool over his left-handed swing. It is so smooth, and it's a prototypical good contact swing that can go ahead and make contact anywhere throughout the zone with breaking pitches, with fastballs, with whatever you need. He has a phenomenal swing, and that's really why his contact is so high. He's also great at battling deep in counts, so he's able to make contact on pitches that normally other batters would end up swinging and missing on, and he loves to go ahead and extend the count. And that's part of the allure Manzardo provides. Although he can rip a first or second pitch anywhere across the field, he's able to wait and really battle around and force a pitcher to pitch a pitch that Manzardo wants to hit, and therefore he's going to punish it and make the opposing team pay for a mistake. That's exactly what you want in a hitter, someone who can go ahead and force the pitcher to make a mistake. And the more pitches you see, the more likely the pitcher is to make a mistake. As I mentioned, when he does get that pitch, he's really good at finding the barrel of the bat and connecting it with the ball. And although his raw power isn't great, as I mentioned, he's a contact first guy. The ability to go and barrel up a lot of balls is what is going to give him some decent power potential in the major leagues. For example, in 2022, he clubbed 22 home runs. This year, he's clubbed 11, so a little bit less on pace than what he did last year, but that's just kind of been his whole campaign at a much harder level in AAA. It's not something to worry about. If you're going for a high slugging guy, get a lot of doubles, but he's not going to hit a ton of home runs. So just be wary about that if you're looking for someone who is going to have that wow potential as your exciting prospect as a home run hitter. He's going to be a doubles guy, and at Progressive Field, that plays pretty well. So I think Manzardo has a good shot of being the starting first baseman for the Cleveland Guardians for a long time. Everyone compares him to another AL Central infielder, and that's Vinny Pasquantino. They have a very similar build. They're both left-handed first basemen. If you watch Manzardo play, as you can hear, and then go pull up a video of Vinny Pasquantino, you will see that the Pasquatch really does have a lot of similarities to Manzardo and what I'm trying to get at here. He's trying to build a little bit more strength, condition a little more, really go ahead and gain some agility to improve on defense. He's a decent defender at first base. Again, defense isn't the most important thing at first base. If you look at someone like Matt Olson, there's obviously value in being an elite defender at first base, and there's value in being a bad defender at first base. But when you're somewhere in the middle, there's not a huge difference. So he's trying to go ahead and really improve his defense and be a solid defender. His arm strength isn't great, so he's not going to be a third. He's kind of a first baseman or a DH kind of guy. That's all he'll end up being. Maybe left field because you don't need a super strong arm to stay in left field. But we'll see how that ends up working in the long term. But for now, expect him to succeed Josh Bell as the starting first baseman in Cleveland whenever Bell ends up leaving the Cleveland Guardians. Before I grade this trade, please go ahead in that top right of your screen, hit that subscribe here button. It really makes a big difference for a channel like mine to go ahead and grow and interact with other fellow baseball fanatics like myself. If not, please go ahead and drop a like on the video or comment. It really means a lot to go ahead and also curate your feed to get more content about baseball on your timeline on YouTube. Without further ado, here is my trade grades for the Kyle Manzardo for Aaron Civale trade. For the Tampa Bay Rays, I'm going to give this trade an A-. I think this is a very solid pickup. Civale is not a big household name, but he has been sneakily effective for a long time for the Cleveland Guardians, and he's going to slot in very, very well into the rotation right now. If you look at where their starting pitching depth is, all you have to do is look at the 60-day IL. Shane Baz and Jeffrey Springs both out with Tommy John surgery, likely out for the year. Drew Rasmussen, elbow surgery, back in July. Josh Fleming, elbow inflammation, out since the end of May. They have 4 starting pitchers on the 60-day IL. That's just not going to cut it. You need to have some sort of depth, and as of right now, Civale provides a lot of depth there. Granted, his time in Tampa Bay might be short-lived. If you look at all the names I listed, plus Taj Bradley, plus maybe Luis Patino gets another shot at trying to start Cooper Criswell, just on the 40-man alone. There are a lot of starting pitchers in Tampa Bay, and there's only 5 to potentially 6 slots that can really fill that role. I think he has a chance of getting traded again because he does have 2 minor league options. He does have team control for a couple more years. The Rays could try and flip him or another one of their starting pitchers that might not have the same level of flexibility to try and go ahead and restock their already very potent farm system from the loss of a top 40 prospect in Kyle Manzardo. I think really acquiring another pitcher at this stage is super important, and getting one with team control that you are able to dictate the next 2.5 years of is awesome. Again, Civale's been very sneakily good, and for the Rays, I think this is a year they could potentially win a World Series. They have a very potent lineup. There's a lot of potential for them to go ahead and hoist a trophy come October. So in this trade, they made out really well. I think the only issue is they could have maybe gotten someone who was a rental and then not had to worry so much about the logjam of starting pitching that they'd have in the future just based off of option years and team control, and now having a plethora of pitchers who are going to be vying for only 5 or potentially 6 spots in a rotation, probably 5. Long term, it makes a little less sense, and that's why it's an A-. but you can never have too much pitching depth. And Civale is a great pitcher and someone I would definitely want to have on my team. And someone, if you're a fantasy player, he's been my sneaky pickup at the back end of drafts for a year or two now. He's a solid player and he's going to help the Rays a lot. And I'm sure they're going to unlock some really great things out of him because player development is where the Tampa Bay Rays really shine. For the Cleveland Guardians, this is my first A plus of the trade deadline. When I first saw that Civale got traded, I wasn't thinking too much about it. I thought they got a decent package back. Tampa Bay has a very deep farm system, but in no way did I expect Kyle Manzardo to be the piece heading back to Cleveland in this deal. I think this is not highway robbery because if that was so, I would have given the Rays a much lower grade, but this was a big shock. It wasn't as bad of an overpay as it was for Lucas Giolito and the Angels, in my opinion, but it was definitely something that I did not expect the Rays to give up Kyle Manzardo in this deal. I think he had the potential to really be a great first baseman, an all-star caliber first baseman. But when you go ahead and look at the Tampa Bay roster, it starts to make sense. You have Yandy Diaz at first, and that's kind of where he's limited to. And then to have someone who's a full-time DH doesn't really jump out the page as someone who's going to be a good proponent to your team. He was blocked by a lot of players. That's just the nature of Tampa Bay, and they're going to have a 40-man roster crunch soon. Manzardo doesn't need to be added this offseason, but it was going to come back and bite Tampa one way or another as he pushed his way towards playing time. For Cleveland, this is a beautiful trade. They're still in contention, and there's a possibility that they could call Manzardo up this year to try and get some usage at him at the major league level. I'm not going to say he will or he'll be successful if they do, but it's another option they can go and potentially give someone like Josh Naylor a day off. Josh Bell hasn't been phenomenal this year, so maybe you take him out of the DH spot for a couple days. There's a little bit of flexibility here. I don't love the trade in terms of the fact that he's kind of limited first base and you already have Josh Naylor, but if you can get a good player who's going to hit a lot and help your team, you don't say no. And that's exactly what Manzardo should do for the Cleveland Guardians, and I think it's someone that fans should be really, really, really excited about. I'm personally not taking too much stock into his performance this year. It's his first year at AAA. Very few players really dominate AAA when they first get there. I'm not worried too much. He's shown what he's capable of, and I think he's going to match that once he gets everything in line. And the Cleveland Guardians should be very, very excited for what the future holds for their new first base prospect. And from a lot of rankings, their new #1 overall prospect. In that case, thank you guys for watching. It really means a lot. Again, if you want, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below, or go ahead and interact in some other way, whether it's liking the video or leaving a comment and interacting with some other baseball fans down there. Go ahead and hit one of the videos off to the side if you're interested in more content like this, and hopefully you stay active as the trade deadline winds to a close in the next 24 hours.